And the way to do that is if you go to the bottom of the instructions here. So this is going back over the linearization lecture, and so we're just going to use this to guide us. So we have an exponential growth, so we're going to pick this one here. And for the exponential growth, in order to turn an exponential line into a straight line, the x variable, we're just going to leave it alone. We're not going to change that. And the vertical variable, we're going to turn that into a natural log. So we're going to pick those two options. So now go to section B, or section B1. And this is column P, and this is row 6. So this is cell P6. So the horizontal variable that you want to use or the horizontal formula that you want to use to linearize a graph, we're just going to leave the horizontal variable alone. So we're just going to, there's an option for t squared log t, but we're just going to pick the one where we're going to leaving the variable alone. So one thing to be clear of here, t here, that represents the linearization variable t, but here t represents time in seconds. So that might be a little confusing, but here the basic thing is that you want to pick the one where you do nothing to the horizontal variable, so that's just going to be the first one. And now for z, what the vertical variable that we're trying to linearize is the number n here. So we're going to pick the one that's going to have natural log. So that's going to be the third one here. So go ahead and pick natural log. So that is the next part, is we've used the linearization lecture to find out how we're going to need to change these variables in order to get a straight line, or change these data points in order to get a straight line. So what this is saying now is the horizontal data is going to be the same in column P, is going to be the same as the horizontal data in column L. So instead of you having to rewrite all these numbers yourself, you're going to have Excel do it for you. So this is going to show you now the next thing that you can do in Microsoft Excel is to do calculations. So the way to do a calculation is always, when you start a calculation, always start with the equal sign. So go ahead and type the equal sign, and then from there, really what we want to do is just transfer the negative 2.27 into that cell. So all you really need to do is just click on the cell, and there it appears. So go ahead and do that and hit enter. So now, now you don't need to do this for every cell. All you're going to want to do is to, if you notice here, if you zoom in, right now the cursor looks like a white plus sign, and if you move it around to the bottom corner, it's going to turn into a black plus sign. So once it's turned into a black plus sign, just click, hold, and drag down. So just drag it down all the way to the bottom. It's kind of hard to see here, so I'm going to have to zoom out and redo this. So just make sure that the white plus sign turns into a black plus sign at the bottom right corner, and then click, hold, and drag all the way down. So there it is. Excel just did all this for you. So all you really need to do is do it once, and then click, hold, and drag it for the rest. So now we're going to repeat the same steps for the natural log. So we want to do a calculation that involves a natural log. So we want to take the natural log of 0.05. So always start with the equal sign and go ahead and type ln. And you can see right there, there's a natural log function in Excel. So click on it, and then go ahead and click on a cell that you want. And always close parentheses. If you don't close parentheses, then your calculations will be wrong. So always close the parentheses. So another way to do that, just so that you always you never forget the parentheses, is to type the function that you want. So in this case, ln, and then close the parentheses first, and then put your cursor inside the parentheses and click on the number that you want, and then hit enter. And now the same procedure repeats. So instead of you having to do this for the entire table, just to put your cursor at the bottom right until it becomes a black plus sign, and then from there click, hold, and drag across the entire table. And there it is. Excel has calculated all those numbers for you. So now we're going to repeat the same steps as we did for section C1. So now we're going to create a graph with these data points. So the steps again are to highlight, don't highlight the words, just highlight the numbers for the entire table, and make sure you select the entire table. And once you selected the entire table, then you're going to go to up here to insert. And then once you go to insert, you're going to go to charts. And then once you go to charts, you're going to pick the one that just has the little dots, or XY scatter. And you're going to pick the first XY scatter. And there it is. Microsoft Excel has created the graph for you. So now go ahead and drag that to section F1. And for this one, since the units are odd because you're taking a natural log, so go ahead and ignore the units for the x-axis and the y-axis. So let's just give this a title, and let's just call this linearized data, or linearized data. Okay. And just like before, you want to create a graph. So I'll do it the long way, but the quick way is to right click the data points and then add trend line. But the way that you're going to see more of the other options that you can do in Excel is to make sure that the graph is selected, and then you're going to go to chart design. And once you go to chart design, go here to add chart elements, and then you're going to go to add trend line. So later on in the homework, you're also going to use the option to add error bars. So there, that is so that's located here. But for now, we're going to go to back to add trend lines, and you're going to select more trend line options. All right, so now let me zoom out. And once you go to more trend line options, you can see that linear is already selected, and the linear looks like a good fit here. So the only thing you have to do is to go back down here and make sure you click display equation on chart. And then once you've displayed equation on the chart, you can increase the font size if you like. And that's it. We've completed the second graph. So now we want to transfer. So if you go back to the linearization lecture, the slope m here is going to correspond to the growth rate in the first part was the number that e is raised to, and in the second part, the linearized data, the growth rate is going to be the slope. So that's what we're going to record next here. So if you notice, the slope is the same value as the growth rate from the first part. So in this case here, the trend line is, we're going to select linear. It looks like a straight line. And here, growth rate for part 2 is the same number, which is a 1.8365. and it is again going to have the units of, well, it's going to be unitless. And we're almost done. We just have one more thing now to complete part 1. And the last part is to calculate the percent difference between the two growth rates. So, another thing in Microsoft in these labs is that I always give you the formulas. So if you look at here, this is, we want to calculate the percent difference between the two growth rates. So down here, you can see the formula. The percent difference between value 1 and value 2 is going to be the absolute value of the difference between value 1 and value 2, and then divided by the average of the two, and then also times 100. So we're going to calculate that in Excel. So this is more practice doing calculations. And for this one, I'm going to go ahead and increase the size of this area. So let's see how you can do general calculations in Excel. So first, let's look at this formula. We have an absolute value of something divided by the average of something times 100. So you can do this in a calculator, but you can also try this in Excel. So I'm going to try to do that in Excel. So I'm going to type equals, and then this is, we want the absolute value. So in Excel, you can type ABS. So there is the absolute value. So it's the absolute value of something, close parentheses, and then divided by the average of something. So you can type AVE, and there is the average. So click on AVE and close parentheses. So it's the absolute value of something divided by the average of something, and then times 100. And now all you need to do is to go back into each of these parentheses and click on the cells that you want. So we want the absolute value of, let me zoom out. We want the absolute value of growth rate 2. So click on growth rate 2, and then minus growth rate 1. So scroll up until you find growth rate 1. And there's growth rate 1. And then you can go back down, and if you notice here, those numbers have automatically been populated in Excel. And the next thing is you want the average of those same two numbers. So click and put your cursor inside the average parentheses, and here click on growth rate 1, but here you want to just type comma growth rate 2. Well, excuse me, that was growth rate 2, so click on growth rate 2 and then comma, and then go and find growth rate 1. And you can go back. So make sure that this is the formula that you have typed in Microsoft Excel. And after you've done that, you can type enter. Here it's going to come out to be 0 just because the numbers are exactly the same, but in general percent differences won't be the same. But for just this example, what really matters is that you typed in this formula correctly. And the last part is to select the units for the percent difference. Percent difference is a ratio, so because of that, we're gonna pick unitless for the units. And that completes part 1 of the Excel lab.